Welcome everyone to part 2 of DataSource's educational webinar series, Master Data Management. Last week we covered the essentials of MDM. Now we will be covering today reference data and reference data management. And then on July 7th, a pretty exciting addition, we'll be covering MDM and social media. And that's something that's gotten a lot of interest and attention given the strength of social media today. Would like to welcome our keynote today. Mr. Solomon Williams is DataSource's MDM practice lead. He'll be taking us through the webinar. Just logistics, the webinar is about 35 minutes in content, and then we've saved the last 10 for questions. And if you look on the right-hand side of your screen there's a questions tab. So we have everyone muted so that the clarity will be good. And so when you have questions, please feel free just to type in that question box, and we'll take all of those at the end of the webinar session. So hopefully that makes sense for everyone. My name is Deborah Langer, Partner and Vice President of Sales for DataSource Consulting. We're very passionate about keeping our audience and community well informed of what is happening in the enterprise data management space. So this is part of one of those initiatives. Next slide, please. Quickly wanted to share a little bit about DataSource Consulting and how we're experts in this space. We are a consulting company that focuses exclusively on enterprise data management and business intelligence. We provide both strategic consulting services as well as implementation consulting services. So on the strategic side, you would find initiatives such as data governance, right, where we address people, process, technology. That's assessments, that's hands-on, on the ground, working with our clients, helping them stand up a successful data governance program. It's roadmaps, it's assessments. We've got a couple different variety of assessments today, from BI, data warehousing, enterprise data management, data governance, and MDM and EDM. Project plans, vendor tool evaluations, those are the types of things that you would see under our strategic practice. Under implementation, we have 7 different practices. We've got data integration, data quality, data architecture, business intelligence, master data management, reporting and analytics, and our newest practice, cloud, which will be kicking off next month. So welcome, everyone. Next slide. Okay, at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Solomon Williams.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you for that introduction. And welcome everyone for joining us for our walkthrough what is reference data and reference data management. Where we want to start with this is, well, what is master and reference data? Because there's a great discrepancy or a lack of clarity out there in the environment between the two. Well, master and reference data are the elements that are critical to the business. They can include domains such as patient, providers, health plans, locations, products and employees from a healthcare perspective. From a financial management perspective, you may have brokers, contracts, eligibility, trading partners, locations, and what have you. But what's critical to bear in mind is that these data elements are generally grouped together into these domains just for ease of management, because not only does this data relate to one another within the domain, but by managing the data as a domain, we can better understand how that data is being consumed, what are the business processes and business rules that are germane to that domain of data that may be different from another domain. Now, reference data is a class of master data which is not specific to a given domain. So what that means is if you look at your master data domains, the reference data is actually how that data relates to one another, how those master data domains relate to one another. And it is a critical component to managing your master data environment. Examples of that reference data can include things like payer codes, geography codes, business units, contact codes, all the way down to the bottom where you get more complex from marketing regions, status activities, crosswalks and overrides, at hierarchies and relationships. So reference data can truly span the gamut from simple code lists, and it become more complex to how do these relationships and hierarchies are defined, and what are the rules for their hierarchy and definition, and then what are the cross-references and crosswalks. So the perspective that reference data is simply just a code list, no, that's not accurate. That is the beginning step of what reference data can be, but it can expand all the way through very complex hierarchies and relationships and crosswalks and definitions as well. The sources of master and reference data are very, very similar. For every line of business in an organization, there are sources of that master data. Same thing is that those very same applications persist the reference data as well. And just in the manner that we would say, you know, well, master data management assists us in gaining that standardization and cleansing across these various line of business applications that store similar data. Reference data stored in these very same systems is going to be stored differently from your operations and supply chain. It's going to be stored differently in finance and risk, government and regulatory systems, and sales and marketing. So the complexity of pulling together not only the master data, but also the reference data that these individual applications support requires a very distinct and amount of effort and practice to ensure that that standardization of those definitions, how they're going to be viewed, it requires a governance process as well. And what's critical to remember is that the reference data is used to organize, classify, and relate the master data being pulled from these multiple source systems as well. So if we wanted to look at the two, what is the, master data versus reference data? It's simpler to say, well, master data are the nouns of the business transaction, the who, the what, the where. So whether you're a customer, patient, or business organization, the who, the product or service, the what, and the location of where the business transaction occurs, the where. Master data is not proactively defined. So name, account number, city, phone number can have completely different values across, obviously, the customer, the location, or the product. Master data elements can be changed by consuming processes, which basically means that as one system consumes, say, account number, where account number may start off with a 6-digit number in the CRM system, by the time it gets to billing or time it gets to shipping, that number could have been augmented or enriched with other data elements in the same attribute, or it could be padded with zeros from a technical support or a physical data modeling perspective. So in just looking at something like account number, as it moves through an organization's business processes, master data can be changed. Master data elements can change over time for varying reasons. Source system updates, customer or patient life events, product detail changes, category updates. So the idea of master data isn't that it's etched in stone. That's not the goal. The goal of master data is to ensure that everyone in the organization is seeing the same information and it's standardized and it has the same definition. But master data does change. And one of the functionalities of reference data management that we'll get to is how reference data management can assist you in changing master data domains over time. So in looking at reference data are those elements that provide context and meaning to the master data within the transaction. So as such, if a customer goes online and they're purchasing a product and this information and this product is going to be shipped to them, a lot of the reference data that comes about during an online shopping transaction is the tax area ID of where the customer is. The shipping zone, whether you're in the United States or internationally, of where the item is being shipped to, the country code, the city code, the zip code. When it gets to the actual delivery mechanism, whether that is a parcel delivery company or the U.S. Postal Service, they actually use route IDs that are built off of geocode information. So all that reference data comes into play to be able to put that particular transaction in context. Reference data values are clearly proactively defined as opposed to master data such as geocode, tax area code, business regions, and what have you. Reference data attributes will not be modified by a consuming process, meaning that if numerous systems require the tax area ID code or geocode information, as that system consumes it, it's not going to change it. That is one of the clear indicators of reference data, is that it is existing to provide context to the master data. Reference data attributes rarely change, and when it is changed, it's a result of either a business organizational change, a regulatory release, a regulatory compliance aspect. Those are the things that generally drive changes to reference data. Now, there is organizational reference data, as I mentioned, like business units or business regions or sales regions, what have you. And generally when they change, they're changing as a result of a business event or a business decision. And I say that to be able to demonstrate context between, oh, it's not going to just evolve and change over time automatically. It has to be driven generally by some type of event or occurrence. So what are some reference data sources and examples? So some examples of operational supply chain could be employee codes, organization codes, accounting codes, procedure codes, billing codes. Sales and marketing, business units, budget codes, finance and risk, supplier codes, product, transaction, and accounting codes. And then you have the government and the regulatory agencies. And they certainly leverage geocodes and payer codes, diagnosis and claims, regions and tax IDs. Reference data is critical to understand that it's generally located in silos. It's located in every application across the organization, and every application has its own structure and format for storing it. Reference data changes much slower than master data in most cases. However, when it changes, it can impact the context and meaning of the master data and the transaction data. Similar to master data, organizations internally generated reference data will lack in having agreed upon definition. So that's one of the constants, again, of master and reference data being a subset of master data, in the same manner that we have to establish a decisioning or governance process around how master data definitions are being defined and how the master data elements are being used. Reference data in the same way must have that same governance. Once we establish a recognition that reference data must be managed, and if you're leveraging a master data management environment or you're beginning with even data quality, understanding how that reference data is going to impact those data elements that are either undergoing your data quality process or how they're going to impact your master data management implementation, it's critical to establish that governance process around your reference data as well. Reference data meetings must be standardized for more accurate compliance and reporting, and understanding if, very simply, if an executive requested a report on the performance of the sales regions in a country, if there is a different understanding of what constitutes a sales region and how the sales regions are structured, you could end up with a completely inaccurate report and not really know why. And then when you dig into the details and one report collects sales regions based on one definition and another report collects sales regions based on another definition of what a sales region is or how they're constructed, you can clearly see that that's where the disconnect is going to begin, and that's just going to proliferate through the environment. Not only that, for more accurate and efficient business process integration, your reference data must be accurate. In looking at whether you're provisioning services, whether you're looking at your supply chain efficiency, whether or not you're looking at, say, in a financial services industry, you're want to getting a sense of who are you doing business with, so your legal entity identifiers and what have you, how they are defined and architected, and how those processes that manage those various entities are performed and executed is going to rely a great deal on the reference data that they're using to be able to group, visualize, and then report on that information. And bear in mind that reference data that's sourced from external entities must have a governance process for adoption, usage, and change. So as you are looking at data enrichment, whether it's from a purchased service or it's a government-funded service that the government provides a service, how that information gets adopted into the environment, at what pace, for what use, for what business process, that must be governed as well. And that is part of your governance activities to ensure that as we roll this data out, we're aware, we recognize the impact, we're prepared to mitigate those changes so that there's a smooth transition. So if you want to look at how do master and reference data interact with one another, in this example, we're looking at a healthcare environment where we have, patient plan, provider, location, product, and employee master data elements. But you can clearly see that they are tied to business unit and geography codes belongs to geography. Supplier codes are segmented by funding sources. Business units around the bottom. Hierarchies and relationships at the bottom as we move toward the right. You have contract codes, contracts, payer codes, finance codes. And what this image just wants to be able to show is that particularly when you're looking at multi-domain master data management, and I know there's lots of conversation around this. Well, what is multi-domain and why is it so much more complex? If you stand up one domain of master data in master data in a master data tool, that is a significant achievement in and of itself. But to be able to establish additional master data domains, the true value isn't solely gained by having your critical data elements organized in one domain so that it can be shared downstream consistently and effectively. But when you look at the 2 domains or 3 domains, how does the data relate to one another? How does patient relate to plan? How does it relate to provider? How does provider relate to location? How does product relate to a location and a provider? It's in those relationships and how we can build hierarchies and views, again, providing context to the master data, that reference data really shines and shows its critical value. In order to understand the relationships between multiple domains, you must have a solid reference data and reference data management foundation. So what are the challenges of not managing reference data? And they are numerous, to be sure. However, data quality, data duplication induces errors, lack of consistency for interdepartmental communication, lack of governance process for gaining consensus or managing change. So you can have an organization that says, you know what, we want to be more efficient and proactive in our enterprise data management. As such, we're going to begin this data quality program. That data quality program matures. You know what? Our next step is going to be master data management. We have our domains, we have our data attributes that we want to master, and they go forth and they build. But here's the challenge. If there was never a focus on the reference data, how is that data providing context? How is that data defined? How is that data used between the various business departments? There will be a significant underperformance or subpar value delivery out of those data quality and master data management efforts because there was no consensus. There was no consensus derived for reference data. Reference data wasn't even on the radar. So now as they go back and try to understand, oh, well, what was the challenge? What did we miss? What didn't we get correctly out of this? It is that body of effort that's going to be Herculean to correct. The increased risk. So the inconsistent reporting due to non-aligned reference data definitions, compliance risk due to inaccurate product or asset classifications, and literally the time spent in investigating, correcting, and building workarounds wastes just precious time and resources. So in an organization that has their resources spending more time on finding the data, sanitizing the data, or this isn't inaccurate, or this is an incorrect definition, let's put a Band-Aid or let's put a wrapper around that. That sheer amount of effort is just a waste where where resources are functioning on non-value-add activities. And not only that, as you go forward and eventually begin to look at applications for sunset or upgrade or retirement or what have you, all of those workarounds have to be peeled back, uncovered, discovered, to then be able to actually migrate to something new. So your costs for, again, migration, upgrade, or retirement now become prohibitive because of all of the technical debt that's been amassed, putting workarounds in place so that the actual corrective action doesn't have to take place, as it were. So we talked about reference data, where reference data comes, what reference data is. It's a critical subset of master data. Where reference data comes from. It comes from the very same systems that you source your master data, as reference data is a subset of master data. What are the challenges of not managing your reference data? And then what should you do with regard to a governance process as it relates to reference data and how reference data is used in master data management? So we've covered those aspects of reference data. Now we're going to go into what is reference data management. So reference data management is literally that collection of people, processes, and technology used to provide the context and organization of master data. Boiled down really simply, it is the activities, the technologies, and the processes used to manage reference data. That's what reference data management is. Now, reference data management is a little bit different than master data management, only because of the capabilities from a reference data management perspective are a little different than master data, okay? So in master data management, some of our key goals are data quality, data integration, data synchronization. And there's a lot of activities that happen under that, merge, match, and survivorship, cleansing and standardization, tokenization, what have you. When we look at reference data management, not only does reference data management put similar processes around reference data, but it also assists us in managing the context and organization of our master data. And as we go through this, I'll show you some more examples and what have you. So what are the capabilities that are required for reference data management? Well, one, the ability to model complex hierarchies and relationships. The ability to manage workflow changes to those hierarchies and relationships. The ability to version master data domains. And the ability to distribute that reference data to consuming applications. Now, when I say this, I'm not painting the picture that you have to have a separate tool for reference data management. A lot of vendors today, I'm not going to say most, but a lot of vendors today are actually building very robust reference data management support directly into their MDM tools. Now, there's a couple of large vendors out there that still maintain those as separate as separate tool sets, but the path of what we can see of evolution is taking us to a converged tool structure where the master data management and reference data management capabilities are housed within the same application. So, number one, let's talk about the ability to model complex hierarchies and relationships. Reference data includes, again, lots of data, not only from internal but in external environments as well. Geocodes, tax area IDs, diagnosis codes, regulatory and what have you, such as QSIPs, and internally produced data like name value pairs, organization IDs, and the like. So reference data must support those relationships across multiple domains because you're going to have multiple variations of hierarchies. As such, if an organization has a sales department and an organization may also have an HR department, as we would hope, the way the leadership views their sales regions may be different than the way the organization looks at its people management regions or its population regions. A sales region may include 3 states in a geographical area, and you may have 9 to 12 different of those sales regions across the country. From a people management perspective, we may only have 3 regions, which are comprised of many states going across the country. And to be able to create those hierarchies and views, again, providing context to the master data, that's what reference data management tool must support. Multiple variations of those hierarchies. And then methods for validating those hierarchies and relationships. How is that done? How are we ensuring that these hierarchies, these roll-ups, if you will, are actually valid? How do we ensure that we're not looking at outdated information or there were updates or an approval is needed before this is actually published? You need those functionalities, again, managing the reference data, which manages the context and organization of master data. Reference data must also link multiple models together. How does geocode information tie to a business unit? How does it tie to providers? How does it tie to plans? How does it tie to employers? What is the link? What is the definition? What is the code set that says this geocode ties to this location? How do we know that? Well, where does that come from? Well, it comes from our governance processes and our stakeholders that help us define what these relationships are, and they're managed by putting in place supporting mechanisms like a workflow process that says that if this geocode structure changes, or forgive me, if this location code changes, or if we establish a new location in a given region, it must align to this geocode or this tax area ID code. Our stakeholders come together, we decide on what that impact is, if it's valid across all organization. If it's not, how do we manage the hierarchy and view for that stakeholder that, you know, that impact cannot impact their hierarchical view? That governance process is in place to help us make through those decisions, to work through those decisions and processes. So 2, the ability to manage and change hierarchies and relationships. So reference data is gathered from multiple locations across the organization. There are going to be lots of people that are going to have a viewpoint on how this data is used, how it is structured, how they're going to view it. And looking just at finance and risk, operations, supply chain, sales, marketing, government, and regulatory, they can look at the reference data and the changes to hierarchies as significantly impactful to their business. So finance, there's new acquisition, drive changes to business units, mergers, divestitures, all the time are going to impact how your business units and regions function. Operations and supply chain, the removal of suppliers, the adding of suppliers, the outsourcing of services at one location may reduce the need for suppliers to actually bring materials to that location. Sales and marketing, which drives new campaigns, sales regions, realignments, and what have you. So a new product rollout may be targeted specifically for a pilot region, but the rollout of that new product or service may take a particular path through certain regions and not others. How are you going to identify what those regions are, what those regions are comprised of, and they will absolutely change and impact how that reference data is used and managed. Government regulatory adds new geocodes at the state level, and then state level payer requirements. Again, huge area flux of reference data, how that reference data is managed, how it's adopted, how it's used, how it's retired. Again, that entire life cycle of that reference data must be managed as well. So in a sense, if you look at the business processes, the business areas across the top and how they can change reference data, you can see how the relating of the models in our little engine here, how the reference data are updated and how they produce new hierarchies and relationships. The ability to change hierarchies and relationships, again, so reference data, a master data environment that was created in 2014 may look like what you have on the left and the reference data supporting it. But in 2017, whether it's new business acquisitions, divestitures, change in market strategy, that master data environment has evolved. It's changed. Well, we need to have a view of what it was in 2014. We need to have a view of what it is in 2017 and understand how the reference data has changed to support those two views. So it's actually looking at what was and what is. And that's the managing the multiple states, if you will, the as is and what is today view of master data that an RDM solution, a reference data management solution, must be able to support. Lastly, the ability to distribute that data. Again, it's critical not only to have the governance and the process around reference data, but how do you distribute it? That's where it gained its value. Having it locked and established in one repository doesn't have the same value as being able to actually use, consume, and ensure standardization across the enterprise. Distribution of that reference data is critical. And then to look at the entire process from end to end, you have your data stewards and the ability to govern the data. You have your reference data hub. You have the various business units, whether it's ops and supply chain, data warehouse, finance, risk, and HR, and sales and marketing. That reference data hub publishes that data so that it can be consumed by the lines of business to gain that consistency. And then the actual process from the hub going into our engine to the far right, just a blowout of what's actually happening. There's a model relation between the various reference data models that you might have, the create, the update of those reference data models, and then how that new hierarchy and relationships are actually created. So just as a recap, reference data is loaded from multiple source systems. That data is harmonized into one enterprise standard. Crosswalks and cross-references are created. Data models for procedure codes, finance codes, business units are created. Hierarchies and relationships are created within the individual models. The data model of effective dates and expiry dates are created to manage their adoption, usage, retirement. Relationships are created for relating the individual models. Data is then consumed by that MDM process. And that's just a description of the slide that came before it. Now, master and reference data work together. As you can see, master data management at the top and reference data management at the bottom. But if you note number 4, which is to the far right, that cog in the center is where the master data, the reference data actually come together. And that master data management solution consumes the reference data by the MDM processes to put the MDM data, the master data, into organized areas and then give it context. So We covered what is reference data. We covered what is reference data management. And we covered how do the processes of master data and reference data work together. I hope that you found that informative and useful, but at this point would like to open up for questions to the environment.
Perfect. Thank you, Solomon. We have had a number of questions come in. Let me read you the first one. Is it fair to say that the goal of MDM is a single source of truth for a particular dimension, while the purpose of a data warehouse is to analyze data in a multidimensional fashion?
Okay. You could say yes. I could say yes to that. So master data management does provide a single golden record or best available view of information as it relates to the who, what, where of a business transaction. And with that, your dimensions in your data warehouse will have a greater level of control, and they'll have a greater level of accuracy by leveraging those master data domains as your dimensions within your data warehouse. And your data warehouse is really for the analysis around that data. So yes, in that context, I would agree.
Great, thank you. Second question, why is reference data management now being brought up more and more when we're talking about MDM?
Because that's a great question. Master data management is really becoming part of the general discussion topic nowadays. It's now recognized that it's not a nice to have, it is a competitive requirement to stay afloat and competitive. And today, whether you're in healthcare, pharmaceuticals, financial services, master data management is a requirement. But there is a great discrepancy between what reference data actually is and what master data is. And in defining your master data strategy, folks are beginning to understand that they're hearing the term reference data. Well, what is the reference data? What is the reference data domain to it? And it's being recognized as MDM is gaining the recognition of a must-have. In order for it to be successful, you have to have the reference data. So that's the main driver behind hearing it over and over again. You really can't have the master data discussion without reference data.
Thanks, Solomon. Next question, and actually I'm going to elaborate on it a little bit. So the next question is, does reference data require a separate tool apart from your standard MDM tool? And let me take this question just one step further. Does it also require a separate data quality tool apart from the MDM tool?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so today you have a handful of vendors that are actually building very robust reference data management capabilities inside their MDM hub. So they are converging and consolidating those qualities those capabilities required into one tool. Then there are still your vendors that maintain them separately. I would recommend looking at the tools, the vendors that actually consolidate those two capabilities together. And what you're looking for particularly, is those MDM software vendors that treat reference data as a first-class citizen as opposed to a second-class citizen, which means is that they raise the reference data to the same level as your primary MDM domains. You don't need a separate tool to do it because there are vendors that have converged tool suites, and I would actually recommend looking at those converged tool suites in that space. Now, the elaboration, do you need a separate data quality tool to do that? I would say no. Data quality is actually one of the cornerstones of master data management, and it includes data quality in its processes. A lot of organizations find it easier to broach this area by starting with a data quality tool and data quality effort and then maturing to master data management. Some go directly to master data management because it includes the data quality capability.
Great. Thank you, Solomon. Next question, and if anyone else would like to get into the conversation, remember, just go to that questions tab and feel free to type in your question. Next one, as data in the RDM changes, how do you ensure the timing of what MDM publishes does not conflict with old reference data?
Okay. So again, looking at the various tool suites, there are a few different ways to handle it. There are, particularly in the reference data space, you have a capability to publish or not publish changes to your reference data, number one. Number two, there are generally workflows established in the tool itself that allow you to look at multiple versions of your reference data. So as an example, if I wanted to change a sales region hierarchy and I wanted to play with different versions of that sales management hierarchy, I wanted to show my sales leadership, this is what one hierarchy looks like, this is another version of it, so that the sales leadership could then make a decision. You can maintain that offline in a workspace, if you will, with a given workflow and approval process, so that once it is approved and the proper communications have gone out, you can then timestamp it from an effective and an expiry date and then publish it, so that it then supplants, it doesn't do a delete, if you will. It would actually publish the new hierarchical version, and the old hierarchical version would get archived. So generally, the tool will, most of your RDM tools will archive information as opposed to a hard delete. That way you can demonstrate the history.
Thank you. Is MDM a point of contact for everything for the business?
Is it a point of contact from everything for the business? I'm going to make a couple of assumptions on that question because it's not completely clear what the goal of that question is. So I'm going to make a couple of assumptions. Your master data management solution or implementation can be implemented in various ways, but at the highest level, you have operational use, you have analytical use. So an operational use would be where your MDM hub is actually taking part of your OLTP, online transaction processing, in between your line of business applications, where there's real-time communication, real-time integrations. Your analytical MDM hub is a consolidation point, standardized cleansing, creating a best available record for consumption of your data warehouse business analytics environment. So at those 2 points, at the highest levels, you have those two methods of use. Now, is it a touch point for all things in the business? I would say it. I would hate to generalize and say it's all things to anything, but I would say it's a significant area of collaboration across stakeholders to discuss business processes, data flows, applications, and how they're being used. It is a significant touch point, yes, but it won't be the be-all, end-all of the environment.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one last question. With reference data management, does it require its own data governance initiative outside of MDM?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question for me?
Yeah, you bet. So does reference data management require its own data governance initiative and processes outside of MDM?
Oh, gotcha. No, it doesn't require a separate process, but it requires to be recognized. If you have a governance body, if you've got stakeholders that regularly make decisions on how data definitions and how data is being used, how data is being managed, and data quality and what have you, leverage that same body. You don't need to have a separate reference data management governance committee or body or anything along that line, but you do need those stakeholders to be involved that are familiar with that reference data being discussed. It may not, the stakeholders, the participants in that data governance body may clearly understand the who, what, and where of the business transaction, but may not understand fully the reference data required to manage and govern those transactions. So you may have to augment that body with those that do understand it. So you may have to bring in new folks, but it doesn't require an entirely separate process, no.
Okay, good. All right, makes sense, Solomon. A few logistical questions had come in. One is, can we get a recording of this? And absolutely, we will be, for anyone that registered, we will be distributing a link to the recording. Another question that had come in is, I missed part one. Is it possible to get that recording? Absolutely, we can send that out as well as part of this. And at any time, you can go to the datasourceconsulting.com website and pick up any of our webinars in relationship to MDM, as well as a plethora of other types of topics around enterprise data management. So there's lots of great, rich content there on our website. If you're looking to educate yourself or members of your team, please feel free to use that as a great resource. Next slide, please. Again, just would like to remind everyone we're super excited about this next one, hot topic, social media MDM. That's going to be coming up on Thursday, July 7th. And to give you the highlights here, it's going to provide use cases for how to leverage social media data to enrich the existing MDM customer record for a complete 360 view. So with that, please reach out to us if you have any additional questions. We're readily available. If you have any initiatives where you're seeking direction, strategy, a roadmap, a plan for how to get started, we'd be happy to assist. So with that, thank you everyone so much for your time. I know how valuable it is, how busy everyone is, and we hope that this was a useful educational series. Thank you so much.